Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Today, my guest is Melinda Davis. Melinda is in the same church congregation that I grew up in Delaware, but her family moved there after I was away at college, so I haven't actually gotten to know her very well, but I know that my mom loves her very much, and I'm excited to get to know her a little bit better today and hear her story. Melinda suffered a stroke, and thanks to conversations with my mama, came to treatment at CognitiveFX here in Utah fairly recently. I got to see her here when she was at CFX briefly and have been in touch since she's been back home. And I'm really excited for her to share her experience and knowledge gained with us today. I asked Melinda to send me a bio and it cracked me up, so I'm just going to read it straight to you. She says, "For the last 23 years, I have been a stay-at-home mom, mother to 5 kids, and all the endless endeavors that entails. Since I'm down to 2 kids at home, I consider myself semi-retired and enjoy volunteering as a certified end-of-life doula. I'm a published poet and enjoy black and white photography. I love pickleball and taking on all the grandmas and grandpas in my area. I have an embarrassing number of cats. None of them care about me the way I care about them, but that is part of their charm." Which is hilarious to me because charm is not the word that I would use for the way that cats treat me, but I'm glad you enjoy it.
Not like Boots? I've met Boots.
I do love Boots. Rest in peace, Boots. He's no longer with us, but I didn't love him quite as much as my dad did. So I guess there's a thing. I don't know. Some people just really love cats.
Yeah, it's weird. It really is weird.
So funny. Well, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story with us. I appreciate it, Melinda.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, so let's just start off by hearing more about you. Where are you from originally? What do you do? What was life like prior to the stroke? Tell us everything.
Alrighty. Well, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and I moved to Wilmington, Delaware about 20 years ago, and I have 5 children. So before my stroke, I had my stroke in 2021. So like everybody else, we had a pretty traumatic 2020. It was a culmination of a lot of events. My husband had been hit by a car in 2019. My mother died in 2020. The same year, our oldest son graduated high school and left. And then the next year, our oldest daughter was graduating high school, and she and I decided to go on a trip for her senior year type of thing. And it was to a surf camp in the Dominican Republic. And so we were learning to surf. And I had my neck jerked back, and which caused a tear in my carotid artery, which then created a clot, which caused a stroke. Initially, I just thought I had a migraine, and we went back to our hotel, and I changed and came out of the bathroom, and my daughter said, "Mom, do you know you have all your clothes on backwards?" And I said, "No." And she said, "And do you know that you are speaking very strange?" And I said, "Well, I know I'm speaking slowly." And she's like, "No, Mom, you sound like you have Down syndrome." And then I also, now that it's this far after the fact, apologies to people out there, but it's a little bit too funny. I was also sending crazy text messages to my husband, and he was contacting my daughter, and she's like, "What is going on with Mom? She is sending me the craziest messages that made no sense." So at the hotel we were staying at, and again, all of this I just thought I had a migraine. And the hotel we were at, there was a woman who was a doctor from Spain. She heard me talking and to someone else, and she said, "Can I please give you an exam?" And she's like, "I think you have had a mini stroke." And my daughter wants to be a neurologist. And so she actually had a pretty good baseline of information, for a high school senior. Anyhow, and I had enough awareness to say, we are leaving the Dominican Republic. I'm not getting healthcare here. Like, this is just not a good idea. And kind of learning after the fact that you shouldn't fly right after a stroke type of a thing. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, through just a series of events, we got out of there. I landed in Philadelphia, taken straight to the hospital, and they took me straight back, gave me an MRI, and my memory is of 7 neurologists walking into my little cubby thing in the ER and saying, "Mrs. Davis, you have had a massive stroke." And I said, "How could I have had a stroke? I'm only 45. And my husband goes, "You're 46. And I go, "When did I turn 46? That began, honestly, literally now at this point, years of total emotional liability and confusion. Like, it was really, really bad, really bad. But that's why I had it. And it was a large stroke on the right side of my brain.
Okay. Oh my goodness. That is intense. And it sounds like it was amazing that you were able to get home beforehand.
Yeah. No.
Wow. Okay. There's just, a lot of questions, but I'm super interested in hearing more about like the injury. I guess tell us what happened at that point when the doctors came in and said, "Okay, this has happened." Did you this whole time, like, you thought, I know you recognized that other people could see things that were off, but did you believe it? Like, was it hard for you to accept?
Well, that's an interesting question, because so I never lost any mobility on my left side at all. And when they showed me the scan after a few weeks, the neurologist was like, "So, he's zooming in on my brain, and it's all this dead gray matter, whatever, what is it? It comes up white on the MRI. And he's kind of zooming in, and right in the middle of the white is a strip of gray, like right in the middle. And he's like, "This is your motor function. This is why you lost so everything around it was affected except for my motor function." And he goes, "It was random." He's like, "It was bad luck that you had a trauma stroke, right? It wasn't high cholesterol." And he's like, "But this is good luck that your motor function was never affected." And I said, "Well, still average." I just still average. Anyhow, so I was, because I couldn't see it. That was part of it, was that I was just so confused. I knew I didn't feel well, but I didn't look bad. And so it was really hard to, and my daughter was worried when we were in the Dominican Republic that I had had that stroke where the person won't acknowledge it. I don't remember what that kind is called, but she was worried about that I wouldn't acknowledge it. So it was just very hard to pinpoint an understanding of what had happened, other than knowing bad things had happened. And the main effects of my stroke at that time was complete confusion, just day after day of confusion. Like, I was thinking, "Where's my mom? Why is my mom not helping me?" Forgetting that she had died the year before. And my husband took all of our kids to my in-laws so I could rest. And there would be times where I'm like, "Don't I have children? I thought I had children. Where are my children?" Stuff like that. I knew my name. I knew I was in my house, but just these there were just a lot of blank spaces that I couldn't understand. And then, so there was that confusion. And then I was completely out of my mind emotionally. I could not control my emotions. If I wasn't constantly crying, I was raging. And I've in the last year and a half, I've yelled at more people, and particularly strangers, over things than I ever have in my whole life. And I'm going to be honest, Bethany, yelling at strangers was a lot of fun.
imagine it was very cathartic.
Really, it really was. It really was. So those were really just and I hated the treatment I got. My treatment post-stroke was very, very minimal. And again, which I think is because visually I looked so fine.
Hmm.
And I could, I still could communicate. I still was funny. I could still be myself, but I didn't feel complete. And I felt just very confused.
This is so interesting because it does sound, I mean, it wasn't a concussion, which is usually what we're talking about on this, but it was a brain injury and one that was unique in that it was invisible as well, right? Like a lot of
Yeah.
times with a stroke, there are physical signs that people can see, or at least like, at the beginning where you said people could tell, like there's a stranger at the hotel who could tell that there was something off with your speech, but sounds like your speech came back to the point where you sounded like you were normal. You looked like you were quote unquote normal, but there was so much that you were dealing with internally. Super, super interesting. And when you described the confusion, it reminded me of like when I'm sleeping sometimes, like when you're in a dream state where you're like, I feel like I had kids. I think I remember this, but you're like not fully conscious, like
Yeah.
a similar experience. Is that?
Yeah, no, yeah, that is what it is. It was, yes, it was like a gray fog. Yeah.
Yeah. And the emotional piece, I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as well. But I'm curious, did your emotions make sense? They were just like extremely exaggerated, or were they not in line with, like, did they not match up with the situation?
I think it would be both. I was having both of those situations. And then I guess I didn't add this in, but the exhaustion did not, obviously, it exacerbated everything.
Mm.
And the exhaustion was incredibly intense. I just could not stay awake. Like I look back and I was like, I've been asleep for 2 years. Like wake up with bursts of time to be able to do something and then just completely wilt. And that was the only good thing that I got from my care was they handed me just a piece of paper, and up at the top, it talked a lot about exhaustion. And that was probably the main thing that was like, okay, something is desperately wrong here. And yeah, the exhaustion. And then I went to see a physiatrist, which I didn't even know existed. Do you know about physiatrists?
I know that I've heard of them, but I don't know tell me more about a physiatrist.
Yeah, they coordinate care. I went to see her because the 22-year-old therapist, and anyway, the point is the neurologist gave me such little help. I was so frustrated with the care I got, and that's a big part of the CognitiveFX experience. The care I got was so miserable and frustrating. And one of these, when I was doing like a physical, I wasn't
At
doing
home, the care at home.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, at home in Delaware. I did some really brief, I can't even think of what's it called, occupational therapy. And I would go there and they're like, how are you feeling? And I would start crying uncontrollably. And I would say, I am so tired. I even thinking about it, I'm going to cry. I'm like, I am so tired all the time and bawling in public. And their response was this, yeah, that happens. I mean, it was so, it was just, they were too young, I think, to understand in any way, and they were therapists. They weren't neurologists. But the point is, they were the ones who were like, you should go see this physiatrist. So I did go to see her. I walked in the room and she said, why don't we start with you telling me how you feel? And that was when I lost my mind. I lost it. I yelled, I screamed, I cried. I was furious about the fact that I was feeling anxiety, which was something I'd never felt in my life. And I hated it. It scared me. I felt massively depressed, which is something I've dealt with in my life, but I thought I had kind of come to a good place with it. And so I was so upset that I was dealing with it again and all these types of things. And she was wonderful. And she said, Mrs. Davis, I've been looking over your chart all night, and you need to know that it is a miracle that you are alive. And it is a miracle that you can walk. But if you don't feel good, it is because you are not good. Your brain is traumatized. And I mean, we're talking, this is like 3.5 weeks after it had actually happened. And it's the first time I'm getting anybody to just, so anyway, she then had me go see a psychiatrist, and they put me on antidepressant, anti-anxiety. I don't know what else, but a lot of medications that way. And that was the first time that I really was like, okay, I'm getting some help, and a little bit more empathy. The empathy, I'm sure you hear this, is such a big part. It's, with, what do you call it? What did you call it?
An invisible injury. Yeah.
Invisible injury. Yeah. So really in that first part, it was just, yes, such a fog, so much exhaustion, and a confusion about how to heal from these invisible injuries, and I was like, well, am I depressed because I'm depressed? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm, so, and the anxiety was awful. It really opened my eyes and created such an empathy for people who have anxiety. I was like, this is no way to live. This is miserable.
Were there specific things that you were anxious about, or was it just a generalized, like all the time, just anxious?
It was, the car was very scary. Being a passenger, I wouldn't drive. But being a passenger, anytime I just being out in public, and also probably exacerbating it was knowing how little control I felt that I had.
Yeah.
And so not knowing when I would kind of be set off, and being able to recognize that wasn't other people's fault. The overall experience, when you talk about pre-stroke and post-stroke, is that I feel like I learned I have two minds. I've experienced two minds. I had my pre-stroke mind that was very noisy, very busy, thinking all the time, lots of ideas, lots of creativity, poor execution, but lots of creativity. And just very, very, just busy. My mind was busy. I loved to tell stories. If I was with somebody, everything they said would trigger a story, and I could talk forever to people and all these types of things. And then I have this stroke, and that part of my brain shut down. It became totally silent. The creativity left. It just was quiet. It was completely quiet. And I said to one of the therapists, I was like, I feel like I understand what it's like to be a man now. And I thought, this is great.
That's hilarious. In what way exactly? Tell me more.
Because, and it sounds maybe counter in like canceling out to say I was really hyper emotional, but that I was narrow in what I could do and what I could focus my attention on. And so that was the silence. The silence was, okay, I can sit and stare out the window. That's what I did. I literally did. I would just sit and stare, and I would not be bothered by anything. I didn't want to add anything into my life. I didn't want to listen to podcasts, or I couldn't read. Psychologically, I couldn't read because it was too tiring. I didn't want to talk to people. I had gone through my phone and I deleted every single person out of my phone unless they were like a super intimate relationship. I just was like, I can't handle any of this. I got off of Instagram. My ability just became very focused. I went and bought all Black clothing so that I wouldn't have to make clothing choices in the morning. I just put Black on every single day. And I was like, wow, this is super easy. Why haven't I been doing this? So just quiet. I didn't
Not a lot of multitasking, not a lot of like doing all the things.
No, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. A lot of listening, a lot of listening. And I don't mean to people around me. I mean to the internal voice. Or it's hard to describe. But what it felt like was that I completely skipped the line on enlightenment. Seriously. It was all of a sudden, I was like, oh, none of this stuff matters. none of it matters. It was amazing.
That is amazing. I'm curious, have you seen the TED Talk by, I don't remember the lady's name, I'll have to look it up, My Stroke of Insight?
I know about it, but I haven't watched it, no.
You're describing, yeah, her experience is fascinating too, and she describes it similarly, like the different sides of our brain and how when one is damaged, the other one is taking over what that produces. And yeah, I think you'd find it very interesting. I want to go back and watch it again and read the book. But so interesting. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for all of this. I'm so excited to delve into all of this more with you. So I want to just bring out a few points that you made that I thought were really important. I love that you emphasized how empathy made such a difference. And I think that's going to be important for all the caregivers out there who are listening to this, any medical professionals. Like, it doesn't, yeah, that really does set up set the stage for a relationship in which you can actually be helpful for people. So I think that makes a huge difference. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm curious, how are your other executive function things? Like, were you able to, you said you couldn't always remember that your mom had passed away, but were you able to remember like things in the moment, like working memory, kind of short-term stuff?
No, because my mind had become quieter, I was able to, if I had to sit down and do something, I was able to sit down and calendar out the week, stuff like that, right? But I couldn't do any kind of higher level thinking at all. So like trying to research strokes and what happened, like I literally, and didn't realize this until later, I had been constantly going to the exact same website, reading the exact same thing and responding to it like, oh, I didn't know that.
Okay.
I had read it like 4 hours prior. So in I think something that was, and it was one of your questions about the people around you, I really lucked out in the sense that my husband especially, who was really amazing during this, and my children just let me be. Nobody asked more of me than I could give. And I think we did have a good communication about, look, you're not well. You're not well. And you don't need to cook. I haven't cooked in like a year and a half. It's been so great. Hate cooking. Yeah. So as far as executive function stuff goes, I just pulled back from anything I was doing as a mother of 5 children, which is a lot. It's a lot of like random little things that are switching all the time. I just pulled back, and I probably got the kids to school. Maybe, I don't even know. Came home, did a walk, and just literally did nothing. I did nothing. And I'm fortunate that way, and not everybody can just take off like that.
How aware were you of the emotionality of and how you were reacting to people, or how impacted you were by all of this? Was your awareness there? Like, did you know in the moment or afterwards, like, oh, that was kind of extreme, or this is different, but whatever? Like, how was it emotionally that way?
It was my ability to be around people really and truly instantly became my husband and my children. I'm okay with them. And I knew like my in-laws have a big vacation, that everybody's there and there's 250,000 people. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not going to be a part of that. I'll lose my mind. And the other funny thing was, we all have deep memories and things that I was very worried that I would say things that I would regret, and maybe partly because they were true, and that it wasn't going to be that wasn't the place to air a grievance suddenly and out of nowhere. So it was interesting. Like, I had a certain comprehension of
you knew that your social filter wasn't there. Okay. Super, super interesting. I would like to hear more about how your brain injury affected the people closest to you. So it sounds like your family, your immediate family, was wonderfully supportive. It was just your husband, 2 kids at home?
Sorry, still at this point, I had 3 kids at home full time at this point, a senior, junior, and an 8th grader.
Okay. And then everybody else is just kind of like, I'm just gonna not try not to interact in general.
Well, as far as caregivers in that regard, our senior daughter had to step up because I don't know where in this timeline, but I started to have seizures because of the brain damage. And they were the clonic tonic, the grand mal, like they were big and scary. And I lost my driver's license. And so our senior daughter had to pick up a lot of extra work. And then also my husband. So it was, I think, as with anybody it isn't just that you have the injury, you have this emotional response to the injury, the change of lifestyle to the injury. And so at this time, it was like we were going through a gauntlet. It was one thing after another. Our oldest daughter she just started having massive depression, it was just too much pressure on her. And then our junior son, he came home from school one day, and he's kind of a quiet kid generally. And he walked in the back door, and this is my thought process that he was like, you know what? My family's completely falling apart right now. I think now's the time to drop a bomb.
Oh no.
He comes in, and we knew that he was gay, and he just comes in and loses his mind about being a member of a Christian religion that still has negative views of homosexuality. And he just came in and he just laid down the law and was furious at us, thinking that we weren't he was basically like, you have to choose your religion or choose me. He's like, he made this ultimatum for us. And again, like, there's just this is too much. It's too much. I think the situation had been too much on him, and this is where his breaking point. And our youngest son, it was so heartbreaking because my kids would be around when the seizures were happening, and they're ugly. They're ugly and scary. You lose control, it's awful. And my youngest son was constantly afraid I was going to die. Like, one day I was taking a nap and I woke up because he literally had a mirror under my nose to see if I was still breathing, which is so you got just layers and layers of emotions you don't even know are going to come out. And then, like with anybody, and this was where the quiet mind was such a blessing to me, because the quiet mind said, you cannot do anything about any of this. You are not in control of any of this. And in control in the sense that I, Melinda, as the mother, need to come in and solve it. That's what I mean by control. Instead, what I had to do is come in and be like, this is how it is. I must accept it first. And I must accept it 100%. And Bethany, from the religious standpoint, because I had to do that, the way my heart opened up to pure inspiration was mind-boggling, because my thinking brain had shut down and my heart had to be so much more open. And so when dealing with each one of these, the daughter going through depression, our son in particular, and I would get inspiration about something and it would say, do this. And I would just do that one thing. And then I would let it go, because you don't have the energy. I also started viewing my brain in a very real way of it's energy. It's energy. And you only have so much energy. And are you going to waste it on thinking you have control over things you don't? Or are you going to, in my case, it was like, just accept this. Just accept it. It's okay. And that was for me an absolutely life-changing experience. Absolutely life-changing, to understand what it means to accept. And that is a religious context in every major religion, to be present, to allow things around you to unfold as they will. And that, when I went out to CFX, I thought my biggest after the cost, my biggest concern was, I don't want to lose this ability I now have to just accept first, accept it completely first, whatever it may be, and then allow the inspiration to be strong, shut down the thinking mind. So that was a bit of a tangent on the caregivers, But I mean, it took a toll on the entire family. It was too much. It was too much. And even now, a couple years out, I worry quite a lot about our youngest son. He's still kind of always worried that something bad is going to happen to me. It's hard, as everybody knows, to manage a marriage through stuff like this. It's hard. It's just hard, it's hard to manage a marriage generally, but when these kind of things, it's a lot. And that also like made me look at other people's lives. I'm like, they have a lot. And not just like logically, they have a lot. It's more like what the toll emotionally of what another person's going through is. And that their question about what would I tell people is, it really is a presence of compassion. You don't need to solve anybody else's problem, but you can literally be there in the way they express you to be there. I had one person tell me at the beginning of my stroke, I know this is hard, but it will be so worth it in the end. And the comment came from a good place. It was the wrong time to say it. And it made me hateful and resentful towards that person, like extremely like, don't tell people what their experience is going to do. Let them learn it and just be there, literally be present with them. And one of my good friends here, she was always reaching out to me. How can I help you? I mean, this is my best friend here. And I was like, I need you to leave me alone. But when I'm through this, to still be my friend. Just know I can't be a friend to you right now, but just be there when I can. And she was like, I can do that. And it was amazing to me, all these little experiences of actually how simple it is to be there for one another. It's when we try to solve each other's problems that we get stressed out. But literally just saying, I'm here when you're ready. And, oh, you're canceling on me again? Oh, I've called you 7 times and you haven't picked up the phone once? That's okay. It's stuff like that.
It's that acceptance, right? Like what you found is exactly what we need for each other. It's like
exactly.
Total, yeah,
Exactly.
I love that presence of compassion and presence with compassion. So yeah, I thank you for sharing all of this. I couldn't say better, and I like what you said. Like it just summarizes so much of what I've been learning as I talk to people and as I do these. It's like there are everybody's story is so unique, and yet a lot of the lessons learned and the things from it are similar. And I just really appreciate that perspective and how much peace came from that letting go, the acceptance of what is, and knowing you don't have to solve it, and just being there for people, with people. That's really beautiful. And you had mentioned your husband. I remember hearing about your husband's accident just 1 year. Was it just 1 year or 2 years before?
2 years prior. Yeah, it was 2 year prior.
And his was a significant. He was biking, right, and got hit by a car. And that was he better by then? Like I imagine he must have had a concussion or something going on too, right? Like,
you know what? That's a really good question. That's a good question. I don't know that we addressed that, because his main injury was his ribs. He had a helmet on, but the helmet obviously broke from the impact, and but he really spent his recovery time also resting a lot. Yeah. I mean, you saying that, I'm going to check with him today. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting. That what you said too about the strain on the marriage relationship, on like it's hard on everybody. I did an interview with a couple. I did like one with the wife, one with the husband separately, and just heard their perspectives of his concussion. And I appreciate your being really raw and sharing all of the hard, like we're not sugarcoating this. It's hard. It's so hard, especially I think like we were saying before, that invisible injury, any injury, whether it's invisible or not, but it puts strain on all the things. This life is not easy. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I would be really interested in hearing, you said you had gone to the physiatrist, which was really, it sounded like she was helpful. Some of the other therapies that you tried may not have been. Did you have a surgery or anything?
No, I didn't have to have a surgery, because as I understood it, they said once your brain has a clot, it instantly starts fighting the clot.
Okay.
I think that's right. So no, I didn't have, no surgeries. I had follow-up visits with what's an eye doctor called?
An
A
optometrist, neuro-ophthalmologist, ophthalmologist. Okay.
not a neuro-ophthalmologist, just a regular ophthalmologist.
Okay.
But that was the only, and then a little bit of the occupational therapy. Those were the only other doctors, and the psychiatrist. And I saw the psychiatrist. Those were the only other ones.
Okay. And then tell me how you ended up coming to CFX. How did that come about?
Oh, okay. So your mom was the one who we were at a funeral. And I don't know. I mean, I'm now going, because I just came. What year are we in? 2024?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this was when I talked to your mom about this specifically, we're talking like it's a year and a half, close to 2 years later, because my stroke issues became second to the fact that I started having so many seizures, and I had to go see a epilepsy neurologist, and that became the big focus because I could not get them under control. And I mean, those are wild. They are wild. They're not good, but they talk about the brain and what's going on in the brain. That was, so my stroke recovery became second to trying to manage all the anti-seizure medications are all the same type of seizures they give for people who are bipolar, people who are schizophrenic, like they kind of double in all these areas. And the only way to manage them is by taking them and seeing which ones work. And if it doesn't work, then you switch. And if it doesn't work, and the way you find out it doesn't work is you have a seizure. So it's a catastrophe. So that became its whole, anyway. So the point is, it was quite some time when I saw your mom we were at a funeral, and she just was like, "Hey, Melinda, how are you feeling?" And I was like, "I'm not feeling well." And I just started bawling. And I was like, "I'm so tired. I'm just can't stop being so tired." So, and then she told me about her experience. And certainly I know your mom, but I don't, it's not like we're hanging out all the time. And the biggest sell for me in talking to her was like, she sounds different than what I remember her sound. I can't even describe it other than thinking whatever she did clearly helped her. So that was when I had heard was that. And that was just in November, I think, of 2023, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Amazing. So yes, because she did go through the program, but she went through, I don't even remember. It's been a few years since she's gone through. But so she told you about it, and then after the seizures, it sounds like the seizures were able to get under control. You figured out what was helpful for that.
Well, back on just that idea of how the brain is energy, and that first stage of accepting things and then waiting for basically a path to open up. And by the time I talked to your mom, I had some lovely practice with this where, oh, this is a problem. This is bad. Our son is, struggling because he's gay and in a religion that he doesn't feel accepted in. Accept that and wait and let the path open up. And a friend called me. She had heard about what happened with our son. And she's like, "I'm a therapist. I'm here if you need me. I'm here. I won't be here if you want me." So I had this practice, and that's just a big example, but there are a lot of smaller ones of like, okay, Michelle was there at a moment and mentioned this to me. A path has opened up. I'm going to look into it. And if it works, I'm going to keep going down that path. It really was just that simple to me. I'm not going to use my thinking mind as much. I'm going to use like, okay, this makes sense until it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I went home and I researched it, and I was certainly concerned about the cost, not just the cost of the program, but, would have to fly out there, rent a car. I didn't want to stay with people because I didn't want to have that as an added stress, So I was like, okay, this will be a hotel. And I was skeptical about the fact that they didn't accept insurance, I truly understand it, but from so far away, it feels like a big red flag. Okay.
Which is funny because my thought is like, yeah, because I don't accept insurance. Like, it's just, I feel so restricted by insurance. Like, this way we can provide this kind of therapy and help for people, but we couldn't if we were going through insurance. So it is, but I can see how it would look like a red flag, but it's definitely like the thing that frees us to be able to do what we do. It is really interesting. So what was your experience there like? What did you learn from it? How How did it help you? 'Cause you told me that it did help. So I'm interested in hearing what it was like for you.
So it helped a ton. And I got over the hurdle of it because I thought, that fMRI sounds super interesting. And that alone, for the cost of being out there for a week, having 2 of those plus an MRI, I was like, all right, that's worth it to me. That's worth it. And then when it was like, oh, and you'll meet with therapists and they'll sit and they'll talk to you about it. I was like, that also was like, that's worth it to me. That was what pushed me. And I do, even though it was a red flag, I do respect it. I really do, because insurance is a catastrophe. It's in any context, right? It's just causing, anyway, the point. So I thought that would be worth it. And I went out and I said to Matthew, I was like, I'm just going to let it be what it is and just I don't have an expectation. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to make things worse. And Bethany, honestly, I was just like, I did my first day, I did my first things of therapy, and I went back to the hotel and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm back. It really was the first day. And I was like, am I delusional? Am I delusional?
Really? That's
Really
amazing.
it really was that fast for me after the first day. And I think the biggest thing for me was my neurologist had done this stupid thing with me, right? Follow my finger.
Finger tracking. Yes.
Yes, they had done this with me, but you guys sat there and looked at my eyeballs, like really closely and really intently. And I was told your left eye is not tracking with your right eye. And then, then the fMRI shows that part of my brain is getting too much blood and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So focusing on that, what made a world of difference. And all the, having all the therapists in one building and just the way it's structured, you're going from one to another, and they've all got notes on you all the way along. And again, I'm kind of talking a little bit about this from the financial point, just because I was coming from so far away. And as I was in there, I was like, actually, I think maybe it should cost more than this. You're getting so many treatments. It's so convenient. You're not, if I were out here, I'd have to be driving around. And the cognitive therapy I did there was a lot more efficient and productive than what I had done through my hospital. That was helpful. And the machines were very, very helpful and very interesting, and learning things like using the multiple stimulation, but building yourself up to that. I had been trying to slowly re-engage in my life, and I was making the mistake of going to church until I'm tired, instead of going to church for 20 minutes and then go home and rest,
Mm-hmm.
Staying at pickleball for the whole time until I'm tired, and then going, when really I should have stayed for the first hour and gone home.
Yeah, that learning to pace yourself is very important. Knowing when to take those rest breaks, and being proactive instead of reactive to symptoms. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Proactive. Yes, that's exactly right. So that part was so helpful. And then I was not interested in making friends. I just was like, I'm not here to make friends. So there's a lot of other people there, right, in the thing. And at first I went to the quiet room during our breaks. But then after the second day, I think I decided to sit in the room where people were talking. And I just sat along the wall doing the puzzles and had my back to people, but I could listen to them talking. And being around so many other people talking about the same symptoms that you've been having was so validating. And I didn't even think I needed that. And I was like, oh my gosh, all of my craziness is real.
I love it. That was actually my next question. I was going to ask you if you had the interactions with other patients and how that was impactful, because that really, I do think that is one of the most therapeutic things about this clinic. Like I love CFX and everything that we do there. And like you said, all of the therapies are right there. You don't have to drive around. Everybody's communicating with each other. Like it really is such quality care for people. But that piece of bringing people together who have experiences, they can see each other, they can see and talk and like just be together and understand each other. It really does. And again, even though everybody's experience is slightly different and a little bit unique, like just that commonality and shared experience can be really, really beneficial and therapeutic for people. So I love
Yeah.
that you brought that up.
No, I really agree. And I thought also that I was very amazed by two things, how validating every therapist there that I worked with was about my individual experience. They would say things like, "Oh, yes, that's common. We hear that." And then I might say, and they're like, "Oh, no, that's the first time I've heard that." Like a symptom or whatever, but it never was like, well, no, that's not, the research doesn't show that, that kind of thing. Instead, it was always like, well, you're unique. Your brain is unique. And maybe this is how and how can we address that? And the being able to adjust to the individual as you go through. I mean, that was incredible to not have to wait like, okay, it worked right now to do this, but to be able to adjust every single day to something that was a little bit better, a little bit more unique and personalized. And I mean, that I can't say enough about the people who worked there. They were really fun, first of all. And the fact that you saw a psychologist, I mean, it's unbelievable. Again, I thought the cost was too low.
I was going to say, I won't tell them that. No, I love that. It is. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you had such a positive experience. And I'll just throw this out there. Not everybody gets to have such I love stories like yours, and there are a lot of them. Not everybody feels that change right away, or even within that week. And sometimes it takes a long time for people to feel things. So it's, again, everybody's experience is unique with it, but when it does like click for people, especially right away, that's like, oh, it makes my heart so happy. And I agree. I love the people that I get to work with there and that I've known. I think next week the interview, well, I guess by the time this comes out, it'll probably be the previous week, but I did an interview with one of the other OTs that works there, and we had a really good conversation about all of this. So I hope people will listen to that as well, just to hear from, another therapist's perspective that works there. And also I recently did one with Emily Peterson. So anyway, there's a lot of, if people are interested in hearing the perspectives of the therapists and the people who work there, there's a lot of podcasts on here about this. So yeah, a lot of episodes. So listen to those, because I think, what you're saying is so true and so valid. Like, there's a lot of value to everybody being there and understanding and being open to whatever your experience was, and recognizing that, every brain is different and the brain controls everything in the body. And so if some random symptom comes up that doesn't seem to make sense, it doesn't mean that it's not real or that isn't really happening. It could be. And so let's figure this out. Okay. So what things were most helpful in discovering and loving yourself post-stroke?
Post-stroke, while I told you that I didn't like what that person had said to me about, this is hard now, but it'll be worth it. I have a completely different viewpoint about pain. In our religious vernacular, we call it trials, but I've changed it to the concept of pain, and that pain comes in so many variations, and that it is a necessary and a useful thing to be a part of. Not self-inflicted. That's a different type of pain, but the pain that comes to you without you wanting it, whether it's a physical injury like a stroke or the behavior of someone you love, anything that is truly outside your control, right? Like an addiction, or, certain behaviors are within your control, but the things especially outside of your control, my response to pain is much different. It is a lot more about be comfortable being in pain and allowing other people to be in their pain, and that there is no timeline. There is no hurry. We think there is because, I want to get back to my life, or, there were because I was having so much anxiety, and, here we were just about to become empty nesters, and you think, that's, we have more time and more money now and whatever, right? We're going to do blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, I was like, well, I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to leave my house because I now have so much anxiety and depression and fear. And instead of fighting that pain, being like, okay, this is what it is for right now. So it's kind of the pain and the acceptance together. And that has helped me. All of these things, the most beautiful things of life, are all the things we can't see at all. But we know they're there and we want them, but we don't want to get them the way they arrive. You don't no matter how hard you might work as a mother or as a career person or as a whatever a person is doing, those are not actually the way my experience is, those are not actually the ways. Having a spotless house is not how you feel comfortable in your house, right? Having a messy house and learning how to do it efficiently is actually where you learn the most. And so having all these dreams and ideas and these capabilities, and then all of a sudden they're all stripped away. All of a sudden I realized, well, half of those didn't matter anyway. Like, why was I spending? So I learned so much through my stroke that I am recommending strokes to people all the time. If you have a stroke, you just have to choose to be enlightened.
No, but seriously, like all these things that you're saying, I let like be comfortable being in pain, let others be in their pain, don't feel like you have to solve it all. Like there is no timeline. All of this stuff is so like it just does sound so enlightened. Like, how do we get there? And it's a hard road to get there, but that's really, really beautiful. And yeah, like you're saying, it's very hard to grasp that, but I can see that it would be really good, right? Like yes, it's something to work towards. And thank you for sharing that. I think too, the point about the messy house makes me feel better. I'm doing it right then. It's definitely not clean.
You did great.
So, okay. So what advice would you give to somebody who is, trying to, I guess everybody's experience is different and probably different depending on where they are in their stage, right? Like you had a friend who was reaching out and asking what she could do. And at that stage, you were like, just leave me alone, but still be my friend when I'm done with this or when I'm ready. How can people help someone who's going through such a hard thing?
That is, I mean, honestly, my first thought is just leave them alone. So my mother-in-law ended up having a stroke a little while after I did. And she's a lovely mother-in-law. And when she called me, she was like, "You're the only person I've been wanting to talk to." And and she said similar things that I actually hadn't said to her, where she's like, "I only want to be around my children and my sisters. I can't be around anybody else." And I mean, maybe what I would say is whatever the person who is struggling says to you, respect it. Respect it. And that's okay. That's enough. And it doesn't mean you can't kind of offer advice or whatever, but let the first thing be that you respect it. And that was what I really, really appreciated from my friend here. She always let me know that I was invited. She always let me know that people wanted to see me, but she never pressured me. And then I had another friend on the other side of the country who also would call me a lot. And with her, I felt like I could just be a lot more emotional just because of the difference of, I knew she wasn't going to show up at my door. And that just felt like I didn't have to try harder than I had the energy to do. And I don't know. I mean, I guess for other people, you're right. And I was thinking about, since everyone's experience is different, and I was thinking about why my recovery was faster than I thought it would be, or I got to a better place. I think a lot of it was because I was in a fortunate situation where I could be asleep for a year and a half. My heart goes out to some of the people I was listening to there. A guy was like, "Oh, I've got a job. I'm a financial advisor. Oh, I've got, I'm in school." And I thought, I would have lost my job. I would have dropped out of school. I was in a fortunate situation where I had the luxury of being able to sleep and really heal my mind before I really pushed it in a real way. So I think that's why it went so well and so quickly for me. I mean, I guess, right? That's just a guess.
Well, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to the people who are like, so we've kind of talked about the people in the next outer circle, but with the inner circle, the ones who are there every day, like family or somebody in the house, what advice would you give to them? How can they best support and help? Because yes, like people need to be left alone, but they also need food and sometimes they can't do it themselves. Like you said, you haven't had to cook, which is awesome. Fantastic. I'm very happy for you, but also like somebody had to cook or at least order the food, right? So how do people closer in support?
People closer in, perhaps the biggest thing is, one, to the extent that someone can, let go of trying to make life as it was. Let go of that and make life and let life be the simpler path that still gets stuff done. So for instance, maybe a husband has an injury and a wife is now doing double the work. You know what? Dry cereal is a perfectly good dinner. Don't hold yourself up to these high expectations that don't matter. And always the reframing of, in this particular situation, like if I think about myself, I'm freaking out, or with my seizures, or the seizure medication, actually, it would be so intense that I would end up lying face first on the ground, exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And you know what? Who cares if I stay there? If I'm comfortable and I've fallen asleep, it's a nice idea to get me to a couch. That's not a bad thing, but it's probably also fine if I stay there. And learning how to make those decisions as they come. I think that's the biggest thing, is letting what's right now be the thing that's focused on, and not saying, well, you've got to get to the couch every single time you have a seizure, or else I guess what I would say is let your life become more simple. Get rid of everything that doesn't matter, especially for the caretaker. Actually, it doesn't matter if we don't go to so-and-so's birthday. I'm too tired, right? It doesn't matter if that vacation doesn't happen. It doesn't matter if the house is a mess. It just doesn't until it does. But I guess that would be my advice. And then in the longer run, knowing that in the longer run, not at the beginning, because it's not fair to say that, but in the longer run, knowing that this too serves a purpose. This tragedy too serves a purpose. And sometimes a purpose isn't what you want it to be. I would never fault somebody who had a similar experience to ours in any way, where it maybe ended their marriage or sadder things happened. I don't know, we don't need to classify everything all the time. This is good. This is bad. This is nice. This is better. If we're all so unique and our brains are all so unique, isn't there such a blessing in the variation of what can and what does happen? And I would just, maybe my main thing after all that beautiful rambling is simplify your life. Pick everything that can be simplified and simplify it. And focus, yeah.
Yeah, no, that is so beautiful. And it really was beautiful. Seriously, I'm loving everything that you say here. But the letting life be more simple, it reminded me, I have a friend who had a brain tumor and cancer. And she just talked about how she had such limited capacity and limited energy. The things, when something like this happens, the things that are most important, those what is truly priority, rises to the surface, and everything else it's very clarifying, makes clear what really matters and what doesn't. And so I think what you're saying is really good advice, especially to the person who hasn't experienced it, isn't in that moment with the decreased capacity, but now they have extra, more things on them, letting their thinking brain realize, no, it is okay to simplify. It's okay to let go of things that don't really matter and just let's focus in. And I think it kind of, I love this concept of zooming in and zooming out. I think at the beginning, especially when we're in survival mode, when we're in just figuring things out, it's very helpful to zoom all the way in and be all right, right now, what do we need to do or not do? Today, this week, very, very short sights. And then when we are able to, like you said, zooming out, because at that moment in the beginning for you, when somebody tried to give you a zoomed out picture, you did not want it. So you need to zoom in, and then later you can zoom out and see, looking back. And I don't know if it's, I don't know, I hope it's helpful for people to hear that even when they're in the zooming in stage, that at some point zooming out will be possible and it will be worth it. It will be, I don't even want to say worth it necessarily, but the perspective will be different. There's hope for a different perspective, maybe is the way to say it. Whereas
you'll learn. You will learn. And what is life except for just to be learning something, not getting right answers, learning. And who knows what that learning will look like for that person and what it might teach them or not teach them. Now that I do feel so much better and I'm thinking about all the work that my husband had to do, the double work, right? Because he kept his full-time job. And then he, it came up the other day about one of the seizures that I had, and then having to call the ambulance to come and get me. And my son talking to me about how my husband had been handling that, because I was I was knocked out. I didn't know, I wasn't there. And my son talking to me about how my husband had handled that and what had happened, and thinking, I don't even know truly what this was like from his perspective, or how that's not to say because he's cagey and he's not sharing stuff, but he's certainly processing things differently than I do. And it has said to me, he let you go through this. He was there, he let you go through it and was a companion to it. And now that I feel better, it really makes me think, am I that kind of companion for him in all things, not just in the things I like? And so that's what, and that's not something whoever at the beginning was like, you'll learn things from this. They weren't going to be like, you're going to learn that you need to be a better companion. I don't know. Yeah, but the zooming in and zooming out is a good thing. And also I feel like if you can have a gentle response to these things, then you can have the more productive hope, not the hope that you'll go back to what it was, because that you'll not do that. And actually, that was one of the things I loved at the meeting at the end that we had with the, I don't remember his name, the nice looking tall guy with a shaved head, who I think started the program.
Mark Allen, Dr. Allen.
Nice looking tall guy. I don't remember.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah. What did he tell you guys?
Well, what he said was basically, he said to everybody in the room, he's like, you're never going to feel worse than you do now. And you'll only, if you continue your therapies in your own timelines, you will all continue to improve unless you have another head injury. So he set that expectation, which I thought was so reasonable. And then he also set the expectation of, don't forget though, you will always have had a brain injury. That's not, you didn't get cured from you will have had it. And so to remember that in your life, and that, that was a comment to me that said, you are not expected to go back to pre-stroke self. And I'm more than happy to admit my surrounding life circumstances are good. We didn't lose a job. I didn't, and so I do want to be empathetic and generous in how I'm saying that, because I have a very good friend here who is very poor, and she also had a stroke. And it's been like a stroke epidemic in our ward, actually. And I looked at her situation and what she was going through, and I was thinking, I can't project what I had onto her. I have to let her tell me if she also had, without having the resources I had, or the big thing being, I don't have to work. That's a big, big thing. Mm-hmm. But just knowing we learn, this is how we learn. And all the lessons are valuable. They're all valuable.
Yes. Amen. Thank you. So tell us, as I think that is a really valuable thing that Dr. Allen said. I'm assuming it is Dr. Allen, that you'll always have had a brain injury, like setting an expectation, like it's okay. And it's something that I hear all the time. People want to get back. They want to get back. And it sounds like we do want improvement. Like you're better off now because you are more back than you were before, but it's not back to how it was. It's back to being able to function, I guess, right. Maybe is how we can phrase it. What are you still dealing with, if you don't mind sharing, and what keeps you going?
I'm still dealing with trying to manage what I think I can do versus what I can do. Like I told you, like I'm part of this weirdo crowd of people who's super into pickleball. And yesterday, my good friend and I, this is unrelated, but instead, Bethany, of trying to stop aging and getting a lot of Botox and dyeing your hair, just always tell people you're way older than you actually are, because then they'll be surprised at how great you look.
Brilliant. I love it.
So it's free. Anyway, but my friend who's in her 60s, she and I were playing some guys who are 25, and I told them I was 72. And they're like, you are kidding me. You look amazing. And Barbie was like, you're kind of dumb. But anyway, the point is, it was such a fun game, or games, and it was so fast, and it was getting me energized, and I was having a great time. And I didn't want to listen to the fact that my face was starting to go numb. that my body was like, we are done.
Mm.
You know, I want to be like, no, we're not done. We got to kill them. We got to beat them. I think that's a big thing about still being realistic of what I can and can't do. And also knowing that my invisible injury is better. Also recognizing that during the time when it was hard, I actually made decisions for myself that I should have been making a long time ago about like what to do for my kids, what to do in my church calling and what not to do. And I thought I was probably one of the more lazy people in church responsibilities, but it turns out I could have been even more lazy.
Okay, define lazy here. What do you mean by this?
I mean, like, you know, like I'm one of those people that if I am a leader of an organization, I don't have any ego in it because I know I actually suck at a lot of things. And so I've got a secretary, you do it, you do that, you do that, you know, like, but even pulling back more from that and letting more of my ego go and also not saying yes to everything, recognizing a boundary of saying, okay, I can come over, but I can only stay for 20, like with you, right? Like you told me an hour and a half because of possible technical issues, but you gave me a specific time. And if I thought I could not do that, I would have said, I can only do 45 minutes. And so it's stuff like that, where it's like, it's okay to make those functional boundaries, you know? And I think we sometimes think of them as being a jerk because who wants to do anything? No one. Like none of us want to do anything. So it feels like being lazy or it feels like not pulling your weight or whatever. But so I don't want to lose the good things I learned from my experience, the quiet mind, the fact that the mind can be quiet, the recognizing my mind as energy. That's been so helpful to me. So, and recognizing that everybody has a different capacity in that, and that's fine.
Have you been able to keep that? That is what I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned before, like you were afraid that going through treatment you would lose some of that. Do you feel like you've lost that? Or are you able to?
Not yet. But that's only because I haven't forgotten it yet. I expect that I'll write it down 10 different places and then I'll still forget it. So I just am trying to manage myself. And I feel like that is something I'm going to have to constantly remind myself that it's okay on a day off, on a Saturday, right? That I'm only going to do 3 planned things today and they're going to be short. Whereas in the past, I would have felt like, well, it's a whole free day. I got to jam it full of stuff. So I'm going to have to keep reminding myself. I don't expect myself to remember it very well.
Yeah. Are there any other, like, I think you've done such a beautiful job of expressing some of the lessons that you've learned through all of this. Is there anything else lesson-wise that you want to make sure that we touch on?
Oh, actually, because the thing that I lost, this isn't less wise, but this is back to CFX, because I lost my ability to be creative. And that was very, very sad to me. That was very sad because I write poetry. It makes me very happy. I was looking forward to the kids being gone and being able to focus on it a lot more. And that was a big loss to me. An interesting thing is when I take photographs in the past, I have so many people would say to me, that is amazing. How do you do it? Can you teach me how to do it? And in probably a judgmental and unkind way back then when I was worse than I am now, I would think, what is your problem? Just take it. It's the photo. Can't you see what I'm seeing? Like, how do you teach someone this? I don't know. And then I lost that and I couldn't take a photo. I literally couldn't. I tried. I was like, well, I used to be good at this and now I just can't do it anymore. So those were 2 big losses for me that were very sad. And when I went to CFX, I said that. I was like, I don't even know how you get creativity back. It's like, that seems like a thing, you're either born with it or you're not, right? And so I loved that they explained so many things that they know to the extent that they know. And that was the other thing is nobody oversold anything, which I was very impressed by. There was never any kind of upsell of like, well, if you stay here for another week, you'll get, always it was always realistic. And they just talked to me about how when we get the autonomic portions of your brain functioning better, then it will have more energy for what I was referring to as higher thinking. the more esoterical thinking, and especially learning how poorly my eyes were working. And once I didn't have to focus so much brain energy on that, my creativity reappeared. It literally reappeared. Like, it's like, I'd hope not to oversell this to other people because but for me, it is back. And I was like, oh, wow. And it makes sense why it was back. I understand it. The get your heart rate up. What is it? Do your mental work, take a break. Just what is that you guys have?
Our cycle, the prepare, activate, recover cycle. Yes. Yes.
That is very helpful. And I use it all the time.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love that's been your experience. And I love that that understanding of how, that's like what we're doing there is trying to get those basic, the rewiring of the network so that it's functioning efficiently and people are not as exhausted and their brain has the energy to focus on those things that it hasn't been able to because it's been in survival mode. And I did an interview with Dr. Allen, actually, Mark Allen. I'll link it in the show notes, but he explains really well about that par cycle and the intervals that we do there and stuff. So I thank you for bringing that up. It does make, it just makes so much sense. And I love so much that it was so effective for you and that it helped that you can take those beautiful pictures. I know that we're not posting the video here, but she has gorgeous pictures on her wall behind her that she's taken, and they're really stunning. And it is such an interesting thing to think of, you can't explain, you can't teach someone necessarily these gifts that people have. We all come with our own gifts. We have our own capacities, and it's not something that you can teach. I think there's absolutely room for learning and growth in things.
Right.
But some things, it's just, it's a gift. And so I could see how it would be very disconcerting to have that feel like it was just gone, and such a blessing to feel like it's back. That's really, really wonderful.
And maybe really last thing, and just that, because I was trying to think about your question as far as, we also assume prior to our injury, the self we knew was the self. Oh, and of course, when we're younger, we run faster, when we're younger, whatever, right? Some of those things are certainly true, but maybe entertain the idea that your past self wasn't as awesome as you thought it was. And maybe you will come to a better understanding of yourself, your experiences, and the people around you. And that will have its own value. Because we all identify with the good things we can do. Oh, I'm a photographer. Oh, I'm a poet. No, I'm not. I'm actually not either of those things. And that was such a wonderful lesson to me. It started to help me start to think oh, I'm not even a mom. These are all just roles and ways we function through the world, but they are not distinct identifiers, nor are they in other people. And we do it to other people all the time. Oh, you're rich, so you're this kind of, oh, you're a working mom. Oh, you're a stay-at-home mom. Oh, you're Italian. I don't know. But there's a million of these ideas, right? And no, everybody is more beautifully complex and wonderfully, wonderfully interesting in their own little ways. So your pre-injury self could be better for all of us.
Yeah, I love that. My friend talks about, she had a brain injury, a couple of them, and she talks about she's working towards Kaylee 2.0. I was Kaylee 1.0 before, and now, and she was great, and I love her. But now we're working this is a new version, and it's a beautiful thing. So I appreciate that, and really appreciate you bringing up the fact that the things that we do, the roles that we have or play at that particular time in life or whatever, it doesn't define us. That's not our identity and what makes us gives us value. And I think because it's really important to point this out, that a lot of times that's what we tend to do. And it's how the world is set up, and people get acclaim for doing all of these things, right? But when that's stripped away, then what, right? You're still valuable and worthy of all the love and goodness and just being a human, a being, that is so valuable, so worthy. And so, those things that we tend to define ourselves by, it's a dangerous game to put all of our self-worth and value in something like that is fleeting and it changes over time. It changes based on what our circumstances are. I think, just accepting what is now and learning to love you and everyone else in that moment, every moment, is really our life's work to figure out. Definitely. So I appreciate your sharing your perspective of it. That helps give perspective to me to know how to do that better. So,
well, I recommend a stroke.
Okay, thanks. Noted.
Helps you get there faster.
Oh man, it is so funny because I'm like, yeah, the things you've learned are so powerful, and like you have this deep like understanding of them. But is that something that I'm like scared? Like, I don't know. It just
I want that.
Right? Exactly. It's so funny. We have this resistance, but I know my like daily prayer is guide my awareness, guide my focus, and like your will be done. Help me to be okay with that. So it's yeah, there's so much out of our control.
There is, but it's a hard thing to understand until you have to understand it. Mm-hmm. It was for me anyway. I never understood the phrase trust in God. I never understood it. Mm-hmm. And now I do. And so I don't know how I would have arrived without, and obviously some people understand it very naturally, but a lot of the people that I know who have such a belief in all things, like of all things will work towards your good type of thing, they are the people who have, from my perspective, the hardest and worst lives I've ever seen, from my perspective. And I don't know. So it's an interesting thing. Can you get there without real pain? Real pain. And I look at friends who have lost spouses to suicide, friends who have children, whomever, like I always look at the Mitchners, and I think, what do they know that I don't know?
They have a son with significant developmental delays, and they are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. Yes.
Yeah. So so it is a joke to say I recommend a stroke, but that is also because ultimately it came out well. I can now say that I'm super grateful it happened. I really am. I really am. Next to having my son who's gay, it's been the most impactful experience of my whole life. And both of those experiences taught me how to get out of my own self. And I struggled with that before. I mean, people liked me before, don't get me wrong. I love it. I liked myself, but I like this self a lot better. A lot.
I love that. I think that is really important. I love that you said I love myself a lot. I like myself a lot better now. That is important for people to hear, I think, as they're maybe going through this. But you've brought this up a few times. Can you give us where have you landed as far as your son and your relationship with him? How are things? If that's okay to ask.
It is totally okay to ask. And I don't expect you to know this, but I will do you know what he did at church?
Oh, no.
Okay. I know your dad was there. Your dad was definitely there. So the day he is, just really quickly, how religious is this? I mean, I've been trying to couch it in the most general terms, but I guess also
it's for everybody, but it's okay. Like, this is your experience. This is your story. So you can share it how it makes sense to you.
Okay. So my fundamental self has always been interested in the spiritual aspect of humans. And in 2022, I was pregnant. No, that doesn't make any sense. 2002.
Okay, I was like, really?
I had a baby in the middle of this. No, I meant 2002. I was pregnant and in 2002, the LGBTQ movement wasn't really a thing. And I had a really strong feeling that said, would you be willing to have a gay child? And I said, no, that sounds terrible. It made me scared, the feeling. And then I sat with it for a little while and decided, no, that's okay. That's okay. I can do that. So that's kind of an important part of the story. So years later, not that pregnancy, but years later, we have our son, Doug. And, Doug is an extremely spiritual, extremely thoughtful child and very, very angry, and had been for years. He was very difficult, and he was very mean to my husband. And he was a real challenge for a long time. And anyhow, he comes to us when he's in the 8th grade. We were doing family back to school blessings. And after my husband was giving him a hug, and he also kissed him on his cheek, like give him I just noted that's not something we normally do. We hug, but he gave him a really, sweet kiss. And after that, Doug was like, I have something to tell everybody. And then he pointed to a couple of cities like, I think you know. I think all of us were like, we all know, Doug. This is not. Anyway, so that was that. And then I just think as he was kind of getting more into high school, and I don't really know what set him off that day to come home and because in our home, honestly, I've never taught that being gay was wrong, ever. Never. I vote for gay marriage. I just haven't. I just never have. We don't have the family proclamation up in our house, and not because we have some stance. We just don't. And I don't know. So I don't know why he came home and was so aggressive about that to us. But in his anger, and also as a side note, anger is something I've learned to appreciate. I was afraid of it before because I don't like contention, but I've learned to appreciate actually the power of anger, of controlled anger. Anyhow, but he comes home, he's so angry at us. And at one point he goes, I've just been so many times felt like I should go up to the pulpit and tell everyone I'm gay. And Matthew and I are like, then that's what you're supposed to do. Then you are supposed to do that, Doug. That is the Spirit telling you what to do. And so, but because he was so angry, and I had helped him write a couple of papers he had done for school about being a gay member of the church. And I was like, and it just that coming Sunday was Fast Sunday. And I said, if you would like to do that, could I help you just get an idea of what you're going to say? Because I didn't want him, I said to him, like, a testimony meeting is not about going up and yelling at people and making them feel bad. If you want people to hear you, you need to go up with the Spirit. You can't go up in contention. That won't work. That's not what that meeting is about. Anyway, so we get to that Sunday. Matthew and I know that is his plan. So we have Matthew and I, Mary, who is a senior, who is already at her wit's end, right? She's been driving around. She's been buying groceries. She's been doing everything. She's taken on way more than, and Matthew and I are exhausted. I'm not even in my right mind. And we get to church. He gets up and he just does it first thing. He gets up and he bears his testimony and he says something to the effect of, I have always known that I'm queer and I have no problem with it, but everybody around me seems to have a problem with it. And he went on to talk about how he had been suicidal multiple times, which we knew about, and talking about he didn't know where his place in an eternal family was, and all these different things that were really heavy. It was really, really heavy. And then he just walked out of like he ended it and then he just walked out, which was, a little bit more dramatic. And then because he had done that, I was like, I should probably get up and just tone that down a bit. So I got up, and the only reason I'm mentioning that is because I looked out on the audience from the pulpit, and there are women in our ward who I would call Iron Maidens, who I've known for a long time, who I've literally never seen express emotion, in my opinion. There was not one person in that room that wasn't bawling their eyes out. It was, as a parent of a gay child, it was everything you wanted it to be. Everything. So he storms out. Matthew goes after him. We as a family leave. We go and we sit in the car. Mary is having a psychological breakdown. She's like, what is going on? So why did you do that?
Oh.
And then we agree as a family, we're like, we should go back in so that people know this is not a hurt feelings type of thing. Let's just go back in and sit down and then we can go home. And we went back in, and Bethany, the ward book group had just read Without the Mask by Charlie Bird.
Oh.
So your mom's generation had just finished that book. And anyhow, everyone who came up to him, like old men like Bob Mitchner, came up and was like, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm glad you're here. And then there was a couple of single men who came up, was one particular man came up and he held him and he really close and for a long time. And he said, "You're not the only one." I mean, it was really, really, really what you wanted it to be. And then text messages coming in, a whole bunch of letters for him, from him, for him, throughout the week. People who had lived here and were like, "We heard what Doug did and let him know that we love him and we support him." And I mean, it was what you wanted it to be. It was very, very Christ-like. It was very powerful. And it also, in my opinion, helped to start to set the stage of, we also have a trans boy in our ward. And that's been very hard for people. And that's been so painful. And it's just, again, it's these experiences of pain. They're just experiences of pain. And I respect, it could have been, I respect that someone in the audience might have been, "Homosexuality is wrong. What is he doing?" That's a feeling of pain for them. Like, you got to respect balance and respect that pain can come in so many forms. So anyway, that was so great. It was a wonderful experience to him. Both sides of our family, were reaching it was nothing but good in that way. And now for the last 2.5 years or 3, I don't know how long it's been. Anyway, now we're just dealing with your typical punk teenage boy.
Sweet. just back to normal.
Oh, you don't want to go to church? Why? I just don't.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. And yeah, I thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's a weird woman I play pickleball with, and I do mean she's weird. She's like, anyway, something she said to me though, she's like, "It's the year of the dragon. The year of the dragon is the year where all the changes that need to happen will happen. Particularly women will start to rise to their full potential and will be entering into leadership positions like they never have. And children will become the teachers. The children will be the teachers." And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. That might negate all that other weird stuff you just said to me. Raw healing.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, there is a lot we can learn from children. That is for sure. Beautiful. Well, thank you for all of this. I really, really appreciate your sharing this experience and just being so real about it all. I think that's, yeah, hearing people's stories, their lived experience, and understanding a little bit more of somebody else's perspective can just, again, add so much perspective and light for us. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad you asked. I enjoyed it. As much as people lament these last days, it's the greatest time to be alive, because we've never been able to speak like this. I don't think, both technologically as well as from our hearts like this, and have, like what you're saying, a context of like, I can learn from other people's. It's incredible to me. It truly is the time to be alive, because we can learn to love each other without the barriers that were imposed on us in the past.
Amen. That's perfect. Let's stop there. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.